Hey, good morning, guys. It is May 5th, and the scripture reference is 1 Peter 4. I have to admit, there's sometimes when I read Chambers, and I think he is either at a different level, I think he was at a different level than me, or it's a cultural disconnect where I have a difficult time kind of following him because of his culture was so different. It was 100 years ago, and it was a different. He's I think Scotland, I think is where he was from. So the the scripture reference is, so 1 Peter 4 deals with um, loving each other and suffering. The suffering piece is where we find this 4:17 and judgment coming to the body of beginning with the family of God is the way NIV puts it. Begins with the family of God. If it begins with us, what will the outcome be for those who do not obey the gospel of God? And so judgment begins with us. And then Chambers takes it into this idea of salvation being, well, I'll just use his words. Never preach the experience of salvation. Not an experience. It's the great thought of God. Salvation being this abyss, he calls it. And I think it's this interesting paradox because salvation is simple in the method by which God provided salvation, which was his son and the cross. But then it becomes much more nuanced in the way in which God saves each one of us. And I think that's what Chambers is getting at here. He's talking about not, and he says it right after, when we preach, we are not proclaiming how one can be saved from hell and made moral and pure. We're just giving the good news and letting God do the rest. So the good news is that God has prepared a way. The way is his son and the cross. And then this idea of, I think he's getting at this idea of then God, each one working out for themselves their own salvation with fear and trembling. That's a passage from, I can't remember where it's from, but working out with God what salvation looks like. And sometimes I think we get a little distracted by the fact that our paths are so different. And we think, and it's almost this, I would say it's almost the equity argument of today. It's, wait a second, that's not fair. Their salvation path looked so much easier than mine. And I think that's kind of the way this equity, today's culture teaches equity of outcome, meaning we all need to get to the same place, not some equal opportunity. And I think it's maybe the opposite. Like, well, the opportunity is equal. We all have access to the good news that God has provided a way for us to be redeemed to himself. But the everything from there on is very nuanced and individual. And so he says down here in the second paragraph, this kind of highlights it a little bit and kind of clarifies a little bit of where Chambers is coming from. But I don't know, in all honesty, I'm not sure why he took this or paired this scripture reference with this. But nevertheless, never sympathize with a soul who finds it difficult to get to God. God is not to blame. So when someone is having a difficult time getting out of their own way and accepting or receiving the simplicity of the cross or of salvation, don't. Chambers is telling us not to sympathize with that person. God has made it simple. God is not to blame. It's not for us to find out the reason why it is difficult, but so to present the truth of God, that the Spirit of God will show what is wrong. It's for us. Our job is to present the gospel in a way that God can then speak to those people if they have ears to hear. And that's the other thing. That expression throughout Scripture is ubiquitous. It's so many places that you hear the expression, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit of God says." That is spoken a bunch of times in Scripture, and I think maybe that's what Chambers is getting at here. Um, is when someone struggles with the gospel, it's because they're not. You've told them they've learned the simple message of the good news of Jesus, and they haven't opened their ears to hear. Um, we see it on the cross. The two thieves, the one of them opened their spiritual ears, if you will, um, and heard and saw, and the other one did not. And so I think what Chambers is saying here, if I'm to kind of paraphrase, is that it is our job to share the good news, and it's God's job and the person who is receiving the good news to then speak to his job to speak to them personally, and their job to open their ears. Hope that clarifies. You guys have an awesome day.